So I'm delighted to be joined today by Debbie Power, who is Associate Director at award-winning architecture and design practice KSS. Debbie, thanks so much for being with us today. Perhaps you could just introduce yourself, tell us a bit about your role at KSS and maybe any standout projects that you've worked on recently.
Thank you. So I lead the interior design team at KSS Design Group. So creative designers working on kind of two sectors predominantly. So the first sector being sports. So that covers training centres, which are fantastically interesting projects to work on. So it's almost lots of sectors in one sector. In the designing the whole kind of day in a life of a player, you get to design all the dining spaces, recreation, through to their sleeping accommodation. And then all the support facilities as well, from the standard offices all the way up to boardroom and executive and even down to the laundry. So it's a full spectrum of different varieties of mini sectors to work in, and it's fantastic in terms of the medical aspects as well, and that's constantly evolving. So it's a big learning projects for those. And then our other sector is hospitality. So that's anything from concourses all the way up to kind of members club experiences. So we've got quite a strong portfolio now in the hospitality sector, with lots of Premier League clubs such as Liverpool and Chelsea and Brighton and Southampton and Crystal Palace, just to name a few. But I suppose the highlights would be working for some of our national stadiums. So over the last 6-7 years, we've been completely regenerating all of the hospitality at Wembley and at Twickenham. So we did the whole East Stand expansion, so 6 floors of hospitality and debentures. So kind of some standout projects there, but obviously recently hospitality has taken a little bit of a dip. So last year our highlights were the training centres, so like an unprecedented year for us. 2 flagship training centres completed for Liverpool and Leicester, completely different buildings for very, very different clients, and yeah, extremely proud of them. The feedback's been amazing. So yeah, a great bumper summer from a training centre perspective.
Yeah, I mean, you know, obviously we've done interviews with the, KSS, obviously at Twickenham, and that's an amazing, the East Stand, and we're very much looking forward to, when this is over, actually being able to come and see the Leicester and Liverpool training centres as well. But, sort of taking into mind what is going on at the moment, obviously we're all back in lockdown pretty much across Europe. So, what kind of advice would you give to clubs and teams, they can't have fans in? So, perhaps when it comes to hospitality design improvements, what could they be working on now?
Well, take the advantage of not having the guests, because I mean, we know how challenging it is working in sports hospitality. You've got that very small summer window of construction. You have to make sure that all of your work is fabricated before, so lots of things can come in modules and so on, to make that window as constructive as possible in such a tight time. And working at Wembley, that's even shorter with the actual concerts that intersperse through the calendar. So use this time for things that are larger scale infrastructure. So often we'll find that some of the electrical fixes or overlays of PAVA and other technological advancements they want to change are just too hard to fit in those windows. So things become more piecemeal and bit by bit. So while you haven't got guests in, if there's larger scale maintenance or upgrades, that now's the time just to utilise that.
And then sort of taking it a step forward, Debbie, sort of once we get post-pandemic, how do you foresee the whole sort of design and for interiors and hospitality actually evolving? Obviously everyone's going to be so much more, health and safety aware. How will that affect the design and the aesthetic?
Yeah, no, I think it's going to make a big difference. I mean, we obviously all want to get back to normal, and people are excited about getting back to the events and entertainment. And I think that will continue that enthusiasm, and people will still be looking for authentic and local experiences and things that are unique to those clubs or those destinations. But yeah, there's certainly going to be that undertone of what we need to address. I mean, we've paused now, we've reflected, the landscape's completely different, everyone's perspective on it is different. And I don't know about you, but you watch someone on TV and you see them hugging, you think, well, how can they be doing this? And you're already reprogrammed in a different way of thinking now, and that's going to have an effect. I think we're going to have to go back to basics, and I think it's going to be looking at the space, looking at technology, and looking at the food. So, looking at the spaces, and if you just simplify it to kind of the high and the low spaces, in the premium environments, we were creating these members clubs like the 120 at Wembley, where everyone has got their own dedicated dining table. So that's all feels quite safe and secure. But half the guests as well could all sit in the lounge, and that was a very fluid and ebb and flow space. Well, how secure will you feel about using something? Was it clean and sanitized? Now, obviously at Wembley, the service is impeccable, and that underlying tone that of course it be kept clean. But I think we might need to borrow from perhaps maybe the hotel sector, where there's visible nods to say this has been sanitized, this has been clean, this has, and it's not going to be just an isolated problem for hospitality. Other members clubs are going to have to think about this as well, where any shared facilities are available, you're going to need to know that they're fresh and prepared for you. And that even on the lower end of the hospitality, where things like the Rose Garden at Twickenham or Centre Circle at Wembley, where space is tight, it's quite smaller square meters per person, and more communal kind of shared street style food where people are clustering, that is going to need to change. And where before people were more comfortable sharing communal benches and sharing tables, and for years clients have said, oh, Wagamama's benches, they've referenced that. Well, Wagamama's now have screens, and we've all been mortified with the amount of plastic that's now gone into the industry to create all these subdivisions. But we're going to have to think of more creative ways for people to feel that they have privacy, seclusion and space, because I think that's going to take a little bit of time of adjusting before people feel ready. And then from a technology side, I mean, it was only a few years ago when we were seeing the new kind of apps and pre-ordering and the available technology that you could have. And at the very premium higher level, there was that nervousness of, well, we can't get rid of the humans because they're what add the personal touch. Well, pause, everyone's got used to that now over all the generations. Everybody now understands what they can do on their app, and that technology is just going to be there. You will be ordering from your table. That's going to be a given. I think what they'll be pushing now is more pre-ordering so that they can manage that as well. And I think if they can push it even further so that you can manage queuing and so on. So a certain project we're working on at the moment, the app will tell you what collection point to go to, so, and if they can manage queues, then we can just try and reduce any congestion as well, which again is just going to help with people feeling safer as well. So yeah, technology has developed. We'll have to all embrace it, but I think it's making sure that personal touch is still there at the higher levels. But if the technology helps support the staff to actually more understand their guests, that they can then add that personal touch by being more familiar with them perhaps. And then food and beverage is something we've been discussing a lot. So, there's been a rapid decline from fine dining to more casual, and that's still going to be there. But the kind of the transition was more to buffet, more informal dining. Well, I just don't think people are going to feel comfortable with a buffet, the perception of sharing. And not only that, in terms of circulation within a space, you're asking the guests to cluster and gather. And again, you're just not going to want to have that kind of destination anymore. So I think that will probably change to more sharing platters specific to the tables. And again, that's all things that need to be discussed and worked out, because that could create more waste. So how do you manage that? Are our tables big enough? Just basic space planning, things like that. So maybe it's more of a tasting menus, shared platter, so that things can come through at stages. But I think they'll be pre-ordered. I think we'll look at how possibly people run their boxes, in that you'll get a preset of selection of a variety of menus, and then you select and pre-order, just so they can manage the consumption and manage the waste as well. But the kind of street food market style offers that you'll still need to create the theatre, there'll still need to be the visual pizza ovens, rotisseries and things to show how fantastic the food has come along in sports hospitality over the last few years. But I think they're going to have to be looking at how quickly they can turn that around. Again, pre-order, collection, if things can be in grab and go. So the whole step of the journey has got to be re-looked at. I mean, even down to the minor details of condiments. I mean, it sounds minor, but every single thing that you touch has to be considered. And where stadiums have had limited guests back, you can't have the traditional condiment pumps. It's all now single-use sachets, which are hugely wasteful and can't be scaled up. So every little detail needs to be considered, and getting that as much as you can a touchless stadium. So it's rethink of the basics.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got a bit of a minefield ahead, and some interesting times. And then obviously, finally, obviously we've been touching on sports hospitality and premium seating. So it'd be remiss of me not to talk about the fact that obviously you're one of our speakers at ALSD International, which is rescheduled now for September. But obviously it's in the recently renovated main stand at Anfield. And I know this is one of your projects. So perhaps you can tell, people a bit about, the design, the concept, and what they can expect to see come September, when we actually all finally get back together.
Oh, yeah. Well, the main stand was a hugely successful project. So completed in 2016. It's the largest single stand in the country. And when you do come and see it, if you've never seen it before, it's colossal. It is vast. And there's over 4,500 new hospitality seats within the stand alone. And it's a variety of different uses. So there's 3 floors of hospitality, everything from the boardroom down to entry-level hospitality, including executive boxes. Some sponsored spaces as well. They have their most successful offer there, which is the Carlsberg Dugout, which has got over 2,000 guests with a kind of street food market, live entertainment, hugely successful offer. And then 2 floors of general admission, which we're extremely proud of, because they're very much like premium general admission in terms of their space standards, the fact that they've got fantastic views, even just the interior design and storytelling, and they're authentically Anfield. They've been really well received, and not like your traditional concourse. So it'd be fantastic showing everybody around. And and very proud of work we've done with Liverpool, both at the training centre and at the stadium. So thank you.
Perfect. Yes, well, we shall look forward to getting together in September, and showing off most definitely the excellent work that KSS has done in the newsstand, because it does look amazing. So thank you so much, Debbie, and we'll see you in September.
Speak soon. Thank you.